So today we're going to conclude our series called Got Questions. It's the fifth of 5 weeks, and the first 4 questions have been pretty spiritual, theological, biblical. Now this specific question today is a real practical question. It has to do with the church. So what we heard from many of you is, what do you see as the vision for the church, or where do you see our church going in the future? And I have a feeling one of the genesis for this question was the building that's going up at 196th and Harrison Streets. How are we going to be different? How are we going to be the same? What are we going to change? What are we going to keep doing the same? So I'm just going to go over the basics this morning. This is who I believe we are. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about this is who I hope we become. So let's just start off with number one. I believe that we are, I hope that we will always be a church that prays and seeks God's leadership. I would say that for our individual lives. I would say this for us as a church. This is how we started, before we even had small groups and before we launched worship. We knew we were going to be at Russell Middle School, and I remember getting together on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and there'd be a dozen of us or so that would meet at Russell, and we would just actually go and walk through the neighborhoods. I remember talking to people, telling them we're going to be starting a new church, and I would actually just talk to them, pray with them right there as they were watching their kids play basketball, and that was how we started, was with prayer. I remember a leadership team meeting a number of years ago, and some of you were there. There was a leadership and building team meeting. We met with the architects. The meeting did not go well. We didn't end up where we thought we would end up, and I basically just cut the meeting off. I said, we're done. What we're going to do is we're going to pray. I remember we just went around the circle, and many of us prayed that night, and I don't think unless that would have happened, we would have got to where we are today. I think that prayer makes things, I don't think that, I know that prayer makes things happen. I remember last year before I went on sabbatical, we were in the auditorium that day. It would have been May 2nd of 2016. And I remember the church just came and they surrounded me with prayer. It was just such a blessing to have you all lay hands on me and pray for me. And, prayer makes things possible. So Jesus, when he described what the house of worship is, now I want you to think about that, with the new building, 196 in Harrison. Here's what Jesus says. Jesus said to them, "My temple will be called a house of prayer." He didn't say my temple will be called a house of music. My temple will be called a house of preaching. My temple will be called a house of community life. He said my temple will be called a house of prayer. Now, this is who we at our best are. And to become our best, it is something that we must continue to do. So here's a couple little just real practical things. I want you to pray this prayer over the next year. It's one sentence, and I think you can do it. Pray it daily for the next year. And the prayer is really simple. It just says, Lord, help me to lead somebody to Jesus Christ in the next year. Can you do that one? Lord, help me to lead somebody to Jesus Christ in the next year. So what it means is you're a listener, you're a servant, you're an inviter, you're a bringer. That's what we do. What if we all prayed that prayer? Then I believe that our church should be living out God's vision for who God wants us to become. You can do that. I'm going to do it. I want you to join me in doing it. Number 2, I want you to pray for the church at this time as we transition from where we are today, in temporary facilities to a permanent facility, probably in February. Pray for our church. We're going to need more servants. We're going to need more leaders. We're going to have a lot more people around. We'll need more money. We have this crazy, incredible opportunity that's in front of us to reach a community. I've been telling my pastor friends, if we can't grow out at 196 in Harrison, it's not because of our location. It's not because of the quality of the building. It's just because we don't know what the heck we're doing. So just pray for your church at this time. Pray for your own involvement. Pray for your ownership. Just pray that we as a church will just fulfill who God has wanted us to become. So number two, that we're a church for kids and youth to discover and grow in their faith. We're a church for kids and youth to discover and grow in their faith. And one of my earliest visions about a new church was it would be a church where kids could come and just be loved and nurtured and grown and developed. And then there's going to be one day when this kid is a senior in high school and the kid graduates. And this kid is sent out into the world, not unsteady in their faith, not unsure of their faith, but they are sent out as a missionary, to their colleges and the military and their workplaces, wherever they go. Because, I was thinking at the own point in my life, the point I needed Jesus the most was when I was a college student, and we get to send all these kids out there to make a difference in the broken and hurting world that we live in. So, Tori, if you can come forward, I'd like to talk to one of our own students. And this is something that we're doing. It's something we're going to continue to do. And we're going to listen to Tori tell a little bit about her story. This is Tori Pedersen. So welcome, Tori. So how long have you been coming to the Water's Edge?
I started coming to the Water's Edge when I was in 7th grade, and now I'm a senior in high school.
So how did you start coming?
My friend from school asked me if I wanted to come to a youth group with her, which was a small group at Stacy Dobish's house. And I really liked coming, and I started making friends with everyone there. And she eventually stopped coming, and I didn't want to stop just because I'd made so many new relationships. And so I kept coming to the church, even though she no longer did.
So what are some of the things that you love about the church?
I've made so many new friendships and just kind of come out of my shell and learned how to talk about my faith with other people that I meet and just grow more as a person.
Yeah, so the question I'm most interested in as a pastor is how is the church equipping you to live faithfully in your daily life?
So before I started coming, I never really went to church very often, maybe a holiday every now and then. But now that I come regularly, I read my Bible more, I pray more, I talk to people that I know about my faith. And so it's kind of helped me to branch out. And when I go to college, I know that I'll be able to find church groups there and just be able to keep steady in my faith.
Yeah, so I'd asked Chad and Michelle who they would recommend I talk to, and a lot of kids were mentioned. You were mentioned twice, and I think one of the reasons was you actually do some ministries outside the youth group. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I write devotionals for the church app, and then I do 3rd grade for Wee Kids on Sunday mornings. So I started both of those last year after the mission trip to West Virginia, because coming home from the mission trip, you just feel super passionate about your faith, and it's something that you want to keep going throughout the year, but school kind of makes that die down just because life just gets so much busier. And so I wanted to join more into the church just so that I could keep that passion alive. And so through writing devotionals and working with the 3rd graders and Wee Kids, I've been able to learn more myself and then just help them to learn more too.
Yeah, so for all of you who read the daily devotionals on the app, and they're going to take a break for a week and we'll start again next Sunday. But if you've ever wondered who Tori Pedersen is, here she is. And I think it's really cool, yeah. I think it's really cool. A lot of those people that were reading that had no idea. Are you 17 or?
Yeah, I'm 17.
I don't think you knew she was probably 17. Now, just one more thing. So there's a lot of people here today, and a lot of them are the youth group leaders. Some work directly with you, some work indirectly with you. Many of the people here are donors, and they're the ones that fund this thing and make it possible. So what would you like to say to the donors and leaders on behalf of the students of the church?
No matter which way you're supporting us, whether you're leading or donating, it's making a difference in all of our lives, and we're becoming better followers of Christ and learning how to follow our faith and just more about who we are, and we're going to be able to take that into our future and show other people the same thing.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tori. Just so you know, Tori, you've gotten a louder applause than I've ever gotten in 20 years of ministry, so congratulations on that. So students, I don't care if you're in 3rd grade or if you're in 12th grade, here's what I want you to hear. You're not the future of the church. You're the church right now. I don't care if you're 90 years old, I don't care if you're 9 years old, you have a place in God's kingdom. Now, kids, I want you to hear this instruction that Paul gives to Timothy. And kids, listen to this, okay? Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way that you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. So kids, you've inspired us. Like, it's so cool to see you going on mission trips and giving so much time and energy to make our church better. So on behalf of all of us who are not kids anymore, thank you for being an essential part of our church. And number 3, we're a church that equips families to flourish in their faith. Now, some of us come here and we come solo. Some of us come like as a tribe. I think there's one family that comes like with 7 people. And the main unit for most Americans is the family. The job of the church is to help families prevail. So in the last year, I've done since I've been back from my sabbatical, I've done 27 weddings, and that number's about ready to get a lot bigger really soon. And I've done 1 funeral, but at this point in our church, like, we're here for families as they're starting, as they're saying goodbye. Last year, we confirmed dozens of kids. It's so cool to see, like, the 3rd graders come and get their Bibles. Now, Chad and Michelle are both brilliant at what they do, working with our kids and working with our students. And they're very clear, like, their main job is to partner with parents in raising kids that will be the next generations of leaders, for our church and for the church. So Joshua was talking in chapter 24, and what Joshua was actually talking about here is idolatry. So the people of Israel were dealing with idols, just like the people of America today deal with idols. And it was actually the same idols. He's talking about money, he's talking about control, he's talking about, other stuff, like things that, compete with the primary place in our heart for God. And Joshua was very clear. He said, I don't care about you guys. Like, you can do whatever you want. Like, he was just fed up with the people. But then he says in Joshua 24, verse 15, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. I want to encourage you to, like, serve together as a family. It'll be like one of the coolest things that you do. As I look back on, my role with the boys, like, one of the coolest things that me and Benjamin ever did, and we did this for about 6 or 7 years, is on the last Friday of every month, we would go to this nursing home. It was like on about 128th and Q Street, and we would have a worship service. So Benjamin, he was like a little guy at the time, like, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. That was like the time he did it. And like, he would actually just go pick people up in a wheelchair. He'd just push them into the chapel. They had no idea where they were going, I don't think. That's one way to get a crowd of people. You just push them to church. Now, some of the people, they wanted to be there. They knew it was like the Protestant worship service that month. And I would sing. I was like the worship leader. Like, I would ask them like what hymns they wanted to sing, and we'd just like pick a verse or two, and I would stand up. And thankfully, I'm like the world's worst singer, but thankfully none of them could really hear very well, so it didn't matter. So I'm up there singing, and then I'd preach for a little bit, and then I'd pray, and then like the coolest thing would happen. Like, they didn't really like hear what I was saying very well, because I was like they just don't hear very well. But then all of a sudden, when I start praying the Lord's Prayer, all I'd have to do is just say, like, Our Father, who art in heaven. And then I would actually just be quiet. Like, I don't know if there's 10, 20, 25 of them sometimes. But they would all just pray this prayer that probably they prayed tens of thousands of times. We'd go around, and I would take the little bread, and I'd dip it into the juice. And I would, a lot of times, like, feed it directly to their mouth, because they couldn't do it with their hands. And I would say, this is the body and the blood of Christ that's given for you. Now, if you ask me, like, what some of my favorite memories are with my time with Benjamin, I might say, like, it's when I coached him playing soccer. I might say, the car rides to school where we argue about politics and philosophy. But I'll tell you the thing that would emerge to the top of the list is those times we serve together. Families serve together. Like, it's an amazing thing. Number 4, a church for the hurting to heal. I want us to be a church where hurting people can come and be healed. Now, I talk to people every day. Despite popular belief, all our pretty West Omaha homes with the landscaping and the brick fronts, things are not perfect inside the houses. Just in case yours isn't, you're not alone. It's actually like fairly common. Now, hurting people exist, and I pray that every week God will bring us hurting people because I believe the gospel is good news to those of us who are hurting. Now, like, I remember a couple years ago, there's this girl from Millard South. She was a junior at the time, and she wanted to be a pastor, so she had to go and interview, like for one of the classes that they take, it's like someone who's a pastor. So, she got hooked up with me, and we talked, and one of the questions she asked me is like, what's the most rewarding part of my job? And I thought about it for a second, but I didn't have to think about it too long. And I told her, I said, the most rewarding part of the job is you get front row seats to God's activity in people's life. And I said, you'll stand in front of a lot of people. And one day on a Sunday morning, you're going to look out there and you're going to remember a phone call you got like 5 years ago that somebody called you and told you they had cancer and they wanted you to pray for them. And then 5 years later, you'll see them and they're doing well. They were surrounded by a church that loved them and embraced them and didn't give up on them. They were healed. They were survivors. You'll stand up and you'll remember the times that someone came into your office and you thought their marriage was over, and it turned out that it wasn't, because they're sitting next to each other and they're holding hands and they're laughing together, and restoration and healing, it happens. You're going to find times that you talk to somebody and they were going through bankruptcy, and 6 or 7 years later, all of a sudden, like, they're practicing generosity. You're going to have these really dark moments where you go into people's homes and they've been overcome by addiction. Addiction to pornography, or addiction to drugs, or addiction to alcohol. And then like 5 or 6 years later, you're going to see them and you're going to forget that even happened, because now they're in this thing called recovery. Our gospel is a healing gospel. Jesus is a healing God. Now in Jeremiah, the prophet says, heal me, Lord. Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved. Now, next week, we're starting a sermon series on healing. It's healing in the 7 most important areas of our life. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to buy this book. It's written by a pastor in California. This is what we'll be doing for the next 7 weeks. It's called Transformed. And what we're talking about the next 7 weeks, and I want you to do this in 3 ways. One is weekly worship here on Sunday mornings. One is weekly participation in a small group. And one is daily devotionals that you'll do through this book. Now we're going to talk, this book is $10. It's for sale out in the lobby right after worship is over. I encourage you to get it. Just start going through devotions. Write in the book, journal, share your dreams and your thoughts and your hopes and your fears and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to talk about like the 7 areas of our life. So next week we'll talk about spiritual healing. The week after that we'll talk about physical healing for all those of us who aren't quite feeling as good as we want to feel. The Bible says, we can get better. We'll talk about mental healing and emotional healing, and then relational healing. For anyone with a dysfunctional relationship, week 5 is going to be for you. And the last 2 weeks are financial and vocational healing. Now, the Bible has a lot to say about all these things. So we'll do it on Sunday mornings. We'll do it in our small groups. And I want you to know, especially about the small groups, is like I filmed all the videos on Tuesday. And what I said at the end of the first 2 weeks, and I want you to hear this, like the best part of your small group has not happened at that point. Like when I'm done, after like the 13 minutes and 45 seconds when I'm done, the best part of the small group is still to come. Because you can learn from each other. You can learn you can learn from people who have made it through what you're going through. You can experience grace through the encouragement and the solidarity, with other people. It's God's plan that we don't find ourselves like in terrifying isolation, but we find ourselves in deep and meaningful community. Now, after worship today, there's an event for all of you who are interested in being in a small group and you're not in a small group yet. It is just right after church. There's a lunch. You'll be in out of here within an hour. And at the end, hopefully you'll leave, as part of a small group. So I can't encourage you to go to that enough. Number 5, A church will be a church for the questioning to find answers. Now, I'm going to tell you something about our culture. And you know this, like I'm not telling you anything new. Like we live in the most complicated and complex and distracted culture that has ever existed in human history. There's never been a time where we have had more questions. There's never been a time, therefore, we've had more questions about faith. Now, Jesus dealt with this. I mean, this wasn't new to him. I mean, it's exacerbated now with all our cultural pressure that we deal with. But Jesus, this actually would have been the book of Acts, so, just post-Jesus, this would have been the early church. But here, there was a guy from Ethiopia. He was a eunuch, so he was like a leader in that culture. And he was actually reading the Bible, and he didn't understand it. So what Acts tells us in chapter 8 is Philip's interaction with the Ethiopian eunuch. So Philip ran to him. So here's this guy that's reading the Bible and he doesn't get it. Philip doesn't walk to him. Philip actually runs to this guy it looks like he's confused. He runs to the eunuch. And he heard him reading from Isaiah the prophet and asked, "Do you understand what you're reading?" So has anyone ever read the Bible and not understood what you're reading? Yeah, so that was going on. And Philip said, the eunuch said, "How can I unless someone guides me?" And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. The whole reason, why we did this series is because people have questions. Like for the last 4 weeks, I've been talking how is God different in the Old Testament and the New Testament? How do I pray? How do I, be surrounded by people and, still feel alone? These are the questions that we've talked about. It's the questions that we'll continue to talk about. For example, in week 1 of the small group thing, we're going to talk about spiritual healing. And one of the things that you'll hear on the video is that this is going to happen through daily time with God. Now, I'm a religious professional. It's very predictable that I'm going to tell you that daily time with God is a good thing. That's very predictable, right? But what you guys get to do is you get to go around your circle. And probably 1 or 2 or 3 of you are going to say something like, I started doing this a while back, and it has totally changed my life. And I'm a busy person, but here's how I make the time to do this. So in community, we can grow that way. Now, number 6, is that we're a church that encourages us to share our faith. So I did this at the first service, and I got about probably 7 to 10% of the people to raise their hand. So let's try it again. And I think we're probably going to be a little bit less at this service, but if you were at our first worship service ever at Russell Middle School about 10 years ago, just raise your hand real quick. So it's actually pretty good. It might be 10% or a little bit higher. So first of all, thank you for sticking with us that long. I've enjoyed being your pastor for a decade. But for the 90%, you're most likely here because somebody invited you. It could have been a personal invite. It could have been something you saw on social media. It could have been a sign that we put on the side of the road. I doubt there's very many kids that were coming here on Sunday thinking, okay, I'm going to go to school, and they ended up at a church. There's probably some intention to how we all got here. And I'm going to have Bob Green come forward at this time, and Bob is going to share a little bit about how he shares his faith. And Bob has got a really cool story. So Bob has been coming about 2 years now. Bob has jumped into some ministries. So tell us, Bob, just about a few of the things you do here at the church.
Well, I kind of jumped in head first instead of putting my toe in the water's edge to test the water. I jumped in head first. A year ago today was baptized at our lot party. I joined the Connections team. I'm starting my 3rd Alpha. We just started Thursday. I joined Alpha last fall. And this summer I went on the Belize mission trip. So I've kind of, my leap of faith has been a very big leap of faith. So
so Bob is a very active person just within the first couple years, and it just shows if you're fairly new, you can be a full owner of this church. we need new people. We're going to get a lot of new people. We need new servants. We need new leaders. But Bob has a very unique ministry. So this really obscure author wrote this book like last year. It's called Prayers from the Water's Edge. And, so what we do with this is 100% of all the money that we collect for the book goes to pay off the building. So I actually find people to donate money to buy the books at cost. Then we sell them for $15, and that's one of the ways we're paying down our building. So
buy a book, build a church.
Buy a book, be a blessing, build a church. So
there you go.
So you guys are going to freak out. So Bob, why don't you tell the people how many books you've given away?
As of last Thursday, 117.
Yeah. So what Bob does is. Just so you know, Bob, that's more applause than I've ever gotten in 20 years of ministry. So, Tori and Bob,
maybe you should have me on stage more often then, or other guests.
We'll see how the next few minutes go.
Yeah.
So this is really cool, though. So, like, what you'll do is you'll give them the book, and if they're local, you'll invite them to church sometimes. Sometimes you're just out in the, you're a salesperson, you'll be at expos, and tell us a little bit about like how this works, like how you do it, and just like how you've been blessed by this.
Well, when the book first came out, I was really excited because I'd met with you and we had talked about the book coming out, and then when you went on sabbatical and came back, and then when the book was then published, I got a book, and you were nice enough to put a little testimony on the inside of it for me. So then I thought, I have a lot of friends that we talk about our faith, and in the industry, I do travel a lot. I go to a lot of trade shows, and then when I'm out and about, I probably have, when I'm not working or traveling, it seems like I'm over at Lifetime Fitness. So I've gotten to meet quite a few people over there. I think most of their management staff and all of their trainers and lots of people and friends that I've gotten to know have these. I carry a couple of them with me when I drive around. It's just,
What's your reaction to people like when they get the book?
Interesting. I get a lot of different reactions. I get...
Let's give us like the top two, maybe.
Well, probably the top two would be tears and hugs. I get a lot of tears. When I give this book it touches people. It touches them where they're at, and then generally those tears are followed by a hug. So, I think it's interesting when you give out the book, or when I've given out the book, it's that reaction. It's the tears, the hug, the thank you. But it's the reaction when you see that person later on of how appreciative you were that you took time to think of them and then give them that book. And that's my feel-good moment.
Yeah, so we're just so grateful for you, Bob. There's, some of you are here because Bob's invited you to be here, and you're a true evangelist, and you're out there being an ambassador for Christ, and all of us are blessed by you, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
So whether it's, giving someone a book, whether it's just, I think one of the coolest things you can do is bring somebody to church with you. Don't just invite them, bring them. And just take them out for lunch afterward and talk about, introduce them to some people. Like, it's simple stuff. Like, you don't have to, ask them, for spiritual laws right there on the spot and kind of make it, adversarial. You can make this, a really loving thing. It's just, Paul, he writes, I pray that you may be active in the sharing of your faith. Be a giver, be a listener, be an inviter, be a bringer. Now, number 7 is that we will be a church that leads the way in generosity. So you've heard me say this before. We look most like Jesus when we forgive, when we serve, and when we give. Jesus, he gave his life for us. Now let's just take a quick poll, okay? Who in this room would like to be known as a generous person? Just raise your hand real quick. Okay, who in here would like to be known as a stingy person? We actually had 2 kids at the first service. They were both under 5, so I'm not sure they were quite clear what I was asking. So Proverbs gives us wisdom. One gives freely. So think about this, one gives freely, yet grows all the richer. This is my experience with life. This is my observation with life. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. You'll never have enough. Don't even try. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. So y'all give in three ways here. You give the budget. It takes $65,000 a month to run this operation. A lot of it goes to our kids. There's some to administration, some to worship. A lot of it goes to like missions and things like that. Now y'all have just killed it in this area. Like every year, like you're able to grow this budget like as low as 5%. This year we're up 13% over last year, and that number is going to need to grow. It's going to cost a lot more to run this operation next year when we're in our own building. There's going to be a lot more people around. It's going to be important that we continue to grow our weekly giving. The next area is our building. This is almost a $7 million project that we're doing. And y'all have sacrificed to make this possible. Yeah, I remember sitting with some of you in the last couple years, like, I'll say like, okay, so we're going to do this. What can the church expect for y'all to give? And like I heard the coolest stories. I heard people say, we've never ever given this much money, to an organization before. And I heard people tell me like, we're not going to get a new car this year. We're going to wait 3 years and just drive this old car around. It's fine, and it will get us where we need to go. We're not going to take a vacation this year. We're just going to stay home and do some stuff around the house. Like that's what y'all did. Like these are stories that you told me. These are stories of the people of a church that is leading the way in generosity. And the third bucket, that is missions. Every time I stand up here and ask y'all for money for something, you exceed like our wildest dreams. 3 weeks ago I asked you for money for Uganda for mosquito nets and prenatal medicine and malaria medicine. Y'all gave $5,500 just in one day. You're never going to see like where this goes. Like this is faith. Like this is vision. This is generosity. We've been taking an offering last week and again this week for the victims of the flood in Houston. With that hurricane, and last week it was about $2,000, and we'll take in more money this week. It's because you care. It's because you know that life is bigger than just yourself. So number 8. We're a church that equips and deploys servants. So I've said it before. I said it about 3 minutes ago. We most look like Jesus when we give, when we forgive, and when we serve. So Jesus said, I don't come to the world to be served, but I come to the world to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. We have about 400 volunteers here at the Water's Edge that would volunteer 1 hour a week at least once a month, which is like crazy high for a church our age and our size. Now, here's the good news. Like if you're not serving, in the next 6 months, we're going to have so many more opportunities. Our kids' ministry is going to explode. We're going to have more people who need greeted. There's going to be so much more stuff to do. So Jesus sat down in Mark chapter 9. He called the 12 disciples over to him and said, "Whoever wants to be first must take the last place and be servant of everyone else." Now, number 9. We are a church that connects people to God and leads them into a deeper relationship with him. So there's a prayer that I pray for my 2 boys every day, and it's a prayer that I pray for y'all once a week. I pray it on Sunday mornings for the entire church. It's from Ephesians chapter 3. This is just a small part of the prayer, but it's found in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 17. "Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust him. Your roots will go down into God's love and make you strong." Like that's a prayer I pray. That's what I want. As I look at Benjamin and David, as I look at y'all, I want those roots to go down deep. Like I was watching the hurricane this morning, before I came here, and like you'd see like these palm trees, and like they're being battered by this 105-mile-an-hour wind. Well, it's really cool though. Is like you didn't see palm trees being uprooted. Like why you don't see palm trees being uprooted is because they got roots, and these roots go down deep, and these roots claw, and they grab onto anything that's around them, so that when the winds come, they won't blow over. Now, the winds and the rain are going to come in your life. In fact, you've been through a few wind and rainstorms, haven't you? Now, what we pray for is that we're going to just connect to God so that when these things come, and they will come, it's predictable. Jesus says they'll come. But we're not going to falter. We're not going to fail because our roots go deep down into his love. And number 10, the last one. I'm obsessive compulsive, so it has to end in an even number like that. I was actually going to cut it off at 9, but you're like, oh, God. Okay, so number 10 is a church where friendships are formed and relationships are deepened. All right, so here's what I say. I say to other pastors that people will come a while for good preaching and good music. People will come forever for their friends. So if people would ask me, what's the best thing the Water's Edge has done in the last 10 years, without a doubt, 10 out of 10 times I will say it's the friendships and the small group and the community that has been formed. It's not the worship service. It's not the kids ministry. It's not the Uganda trip. It's not the We Serve Day. It's the friendships and the community. There are many of you who don't have to go through life alone because of this church. There are many of you, your life has been made better because of the people of this church. Some of you take vacations together. You're going to start meeting in homes next week again. It's like the coolest thing. Proverbs tells us is iron sharpens iron. So a friend sharpens a friend. And we all need that person. We need those people. God did not create us to live in terrifying isolation. God created us to live in authentic, intimate community. So if you're not in a small group yet, I cannot encourage you enough to go to the event right after church today. Get in a small group, try it out for 7 weeks. So AJ, will you come on up? AJ was the first person in the church that wasn't in my family, and we actually had to hire him. So one morning I was running, back when I used to do that a lot, and I was running up Harrison Street between 180th and 192nd. And our leadership team was a launch team at the time, was trying to figure out what we would call this church. And we were stuck. I had all the people come up with names. There's 25 names, and none of us liked any of them. They were all really predictable. And I was listening to a song by the David Crowder Band, and the song was called Come and Listen. And I wasn't expecting this, but it just happened. I knew that he was talking about the time that Jesus was speaking in the Gospel of Mark. So here's what was going on. Jesus was talking. There were so many people who were there listening to him, and it's important to know who these people are. These were his followers and his disciples. These were also seekers who had a lot of questions. They were lonely people. Everybody was there. Some of them were brought by others. Some just kind of stumbled in. There was people who were hurting, and there were so many people that Jesus had to get on a boat. He got on a boat right at the water's edge, and all the people gathered at the lake shore or the water's edge, and they listened to the teachings of Jesus. And then Jesus, he started to teach them by talking about parables, and he tells this really cool story about this farmer that goes out and scatters all the seed, and ever since then, the world has never been the same again. And I thought, that's perfect. That's the name right there, the water's edge. All the people, all of us who are sinners and all of us who are saints, all of us who are whole and all of us who are hurting, all of us who feel community, all of us who are alone, we come to the water's edge to hear the teachings of the one who can change everything. And then after the teaching is done, we disperse back to our places. And we share the same grace that has been given to us. We love in the same way that we have been loved. And because we're different, the world will be different as well. So I thought it'd be really cool, AJ, if you sing this song, and you're not going to be able to see it, but the rest of us will. And I just wanted you to take a look at where we've been the last 10 years or so, and we'll do this again in 10 years. It's going to be really cool to see how God's living out this dream for us as a church, for us as families, for us as individuals.